Get started with this event. I'm very keen and happy to hear more about it and have the dialogues. So today it's all about never waste a good crisis. With us we have Lars Wittig. He's the country manager of IWG in the Philippines, in Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, and South Korea. And he's also the VP of Sales for Asian and South Korea. So today, I think Lars, he will be talking about what your company does now, will define how well you do post-COVID. Also some discussion on who is doing what and why, and looking at from a walk in the mall to the largest airline companies, what is happening out there, what kind of experiences do we all have, and how are businesses perceived by customers and shareholders. So all of this, great opportunity to have this. I know Lars is keen to have a good Q&A going when his presentation is done. Feel free to type in questions in the chat as we go along, but when we get to the Q&A, we are also happy to unmute you and you can ask some questions or share some perspectives on your own. I think we all like here at Nordjam to do interactive things, and this is also what's happening today. This presentation from today is not being shared, but we are recording this session and we'll make it available on our new website later this week. So you will have an opportunity there to review it again if you haven't managed to take exact notes. Finally, I just want to say, if there's anybody from the press, from the media, please do reach out to Nordjam or to Lars if you want to quote anything from this event, just to be sure that the quote is right. All right, Lars, I would like to hand it over to you. I'm keen. Thank you so much for you doing this together with Nordjam. As everybody can see, I mean, IWD logo is just here behind me. We are very happy for this cooperation with you, Lars.
Thank you very much, Jesper, and yeah, very much likewise, of course. Let me see if I can share my screen properly. Do you see my screen now?
Yes.
Excellent. Yeah, I decided to name this Never Waste a Good Crisis. I mean, every single company, industry, and even every single country has hit a wall. The COVID-19 pandemic has put the world to a grinding halt for nearly 1 year now. And we are in the middle of the biggest health, but also economic crisis that any living soul on this planet has ever experienced. So no one could have prepared for this, and some businesses will not even survive this crisis. Others, they will survive, but when better times return, then they may feel that they're not getting their fair share. Meanwhile, others will seize the opportunity. They will now re-engineer and reinvent their businesses, and they will take giant shares of the economic recovery when it happens. So today, I will present a few cases and points, and then hopefully there will be a good discussion where we can talk about the best practices, the good, the bad, the ugly, as I like to call it, on what to do and what not to do in the middle of this crisis where we are now, and how better to prepare for what awaits us on the other side. Never let a good crisis go to waste. It was actually Winston Churchill who said that. As we know, Winston Churchill knew a thing or two about crisis, and he actually made this statement towards the end of the Second World War. At that time, the negotiations or talks had been initiated, including on the one on Malta, about how to proceed after the war had ended. What is inspiring, I believe, about such a statement is that Churchill, he clearly looks for a silver lining, even during a crisis, and seeking opportunities. Backing up a little bit, before the COVID-19 crisis hit us, things were actually moving very quickly. Fast and furious, as I like to call it, but things kept accelerating. Um, the lifespan of a company had been shortened dramatically in a more historical perspective. If you go back to year 1920, and if your company then was in the S&P 500, statistically, that company would remain so for 70 years. Nowadays, or up until COVID-19 hit us, it's barely 10 years because either the businesses are not quick enough, agile enough in order to keep up with their industries and then they die, or their entire industries suddenly become obsolete. My first job was with the biggest company in, I think then in all of Scandinavia. It was the East Asiatic Company, more than 100 years old, royal family on the board. Today, it doesn't even exist. And it's not that many years ago. No, nowadays, it is not the bigger fish that eats the smaller fish. It is actually the faster fish, the agile one that will eat the slower fish. But now with COVID, we have hit a wall, or in staying in the submerged fish language, hit a dam. We have, as I said earlier, there's not a living soul on this planet that has experienced a greater global crisis than this. Crisis that is defined as the negative changes, especially when they occur abruptly, with little or no warning. So the more sudden the crisis hits us, the bigger the impact. It's like if we fall off a tall building, it's not the fall that will kill us, it is the abrupt stop at impact. And remember what I said before, change had never been faster than it was before COVID-19. We'd never been more agile, never moved faster than we did. And now we literally hit a wall. So what now? Shall we just wait for the good old days to return again? I really do not think so. The thing is, good days always return. Better times will arrive, there will be recovery. But it is never in the good old way, it is always in a good new way. That is what history has learned us. We have been taught that. So let's be wise about this. So we have to prepare ourselves, but be prepared. It will be different. It will for sure be different. So you can say, and this I believe in very firmly, that what we do now in the middle of the crisis, that will define how we will come out on the other side. If we don't do anything, clearly there's a higher risk that we won't even be alive any longer coming out on the other side. If we do come out on the other side, but we have not re-engineered or rethought our business, we will see that we will not regain the same shares of our market as we had pre-COVID. It's only those of us who are re-engineering, rethinking, reinventing ourselves and our businesses now that will get a giant share on the other side. And who does not want that? So very important not to be complacent because we are told that we can't do anything. I've taken a few examples here. The first one is within the retail industry, and it is literally from me walking through Glorietta, the good old quad. I walked in because I was thinking this was about July, the month of July last year, that during the lockdown and people working from home, nobody would go and buy a suit, so they had to be on sale. So I headed over to Marks and Spencer, and they had clothes on sale, but no suits. Actually, it was clothing, garments that people were more likely to buy amid the COVID-19 lockdown. But the suits, they were just in the very back of the store and not given any attention and zero sales. So I decided to go back to the office without buying any, of course, because I would only be enticed if it was a damn good sale. However, on my way back, I passed Floorshine, and they had an enormous sale, 70% off on tuxedo shoes. And although I have a tuxedo, I must confess I've always been wearing my regular black work shoes with it. But now I could suddenly buy my tuxedo shoes, and obviously no occasions then, nor and still not to wear my tuxedo and now my new shoes. But I bought those shoes because it was a good price. So clearly the difference here is Floorshine are not holding their breath and as Marks and Spencer. Marks and Spencer seems to be holding their breath, thinking that they won't turn blue and hoping that they will still have a pulse coming out on the other side. Another industry that, as we all know, is really hammered is the airlines. And again, some they launches have launched flights to nowhere, while others, they, metaphorically speaking, have left their customers behind. On the more innovative side, Singapore Airlines, flights to nowhere, and now even meals without leaving the tarmac, meals on the ground, they call it. So you and your loved ones could say, book two first-class seats and enjoy a first-class meal on a big jet airliner without even leaving the gate. Is this going to save their bottom line? Probably not. I doubt it very much if it can even be measured. But it gives them so much publicity. It shows innovation. It shows that they are different. It makes us smile. It tells us something about success, innovation, being different, and becoming top of mind. So when we can fly again, not only will they be so much more top of mind, Singapore Airlines, as human beings, we have a tendency to like to mirror ourselves in success. When we buy a product from a success story, we almost feel like we buy a small share of that success. Singapore Airlines, they understand this, and I believe that flights to nowhere, meals on the ground, and similar undertakings now will help them tremendously when we again can return to the airports and go places. On the other end of the scale, Scandinavian Airlines. I had a round trip ticket for June last year from Copenhagen to San Francisco. Understandably, the flight was cancelled. I did go to Copenhagen actually, and I had to cancel, there were many canceled flights, so I had to buy new tickets all the time. But all the airlines, they actually refunded me within approximately a week. Qatar, Emirates, Singapore Airlines, they all refunded me quickly. Even Cebu Pacific refunded me for a trip that I had booked pre-COVID-19. I had booked it for, I believe, Hanoi. They were faster, even Cebu Pacific were faster at refunding me than Scandinavian Airlines. And Scandinavian Airlines tried to tell me that they had never heard about Cebu Pacific, but it had to be a very small airline to be able to refund so quickly. but I asked if Qatar, Emirates, and Singapore Airlines also were equally smaller than Scandinavian Airlines, and then we finished. I was told we don't get anywhere with this conversation, and actually they were right, because it took 8 months for me to get my money, and I read in the media that they are being fined by the government now for this behavior. I will do my utmost never ever to fly Scandinavian Airlines again, and if I should be forced to, by mistake or by default, because they're the only ones flying to a certain destination, say 15 years from now, this would still nag me for sure. So these are like the good and the absolute ugly, and it will define how they return. Another industry that we all know have been affected tremendously is, of course, the hotels. Some hotels, they simply are going or have gone dormant, while others, they keep innovating. And innovating, you can do it and then get some revenue here and now. For example, the hotels that we know have been turned into quarantine locations. But you can also be innovative, just like Singapore Airlines, where it won't necessarily give you any revenue that are meaningful or zero, but where it really will make a difference. I saw a letter that was posted on social media. It was in Danish, so I didn't include it here. But it was a hotel in Denmark that wrote to their most loyal customers, asking how they were, saying how much they missed them, how much they're looking forward to when we can all meet again at their hotel. And by the way, in the meantime, here are some shampoos and some soaps, and some people even got a towel or a wardrobe, what's called a bathrobe, from the hotel. Very, very clever, I think, to raise your hand and make yourself visible in a very positive manner when it is least expected. And these customers, of course, will have that hotel top of mind for sure, and with a high preference when we again will be able to return to our hotels, resorts, and in general, normal free moving again. My own industry, Regis, Spaces, HQ, all brands that we have here in the Philippines under IWG, Flexible Workspace as a Service. This has been and still is the biggest flexible working experiment in history. Suddenly, not by choice, but by force, we have been forced not to go to the office. We have been asked, if at all possible, to work from home or not to work at all. And we have had to look for other alternatives, for better and for worse. But it has been an interesting learning. I've included a few articles here. The headline speaks for themselves, but also a little bit from social media. I like the one to the right, the fellow there from Ireland. I love you, Dublin, but you're overpriced and gridlocked. If remote working in Ireland is here to stay, it might be transformative. Imagine if your company said, choose anywhere to live. We might be, so this guy could live anywhere in Ireland and work from there. And that is basically what we have realized right now. So it has totally changed the perception of flexible working, of hybrid working, of distributed workforce. It is something that was already starting to happen before COVID-19 hit us. The employees, in particular, the younger employees, really wanted the ability to work whenever and wherever, but the employers were far from on board with that concept. That has changed thanks to this enormous experiment. So this hybrid working, a new buzzword, that will become one of the legacies from the COVID-19 pandemic. Financially, it is very driving a lot of effectiveness. You can consolidate your portfolio. You can reduce your capital investments in conventional offices and even operational expenses, because there will be much more shared offices. So thereby improving the utilization, and by making less capital investments and by not entering huge, very long-term conventional leases, it's a big burden off your balance sheets. The agility by your organizations is equally tremendous. So the HR managers, not just the CFOs, but also human resources, they love this because they're able to scale rapidly up or down, much more mobile, flexible workforce. There's a much more increased speed to the market and a maximum location agility, obviously, since you can hire the talents almost regardless where they are. And you can quickly adapt to interim solutions with this type of flexibility. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, the employees. The employees, they like this. They never wanted to be measured by a timesheet or an older, grumpy office manager with, like me in my suit, being able to maybe spot them outside his office in order to keep him happy. No, they want to be measured by results, working anywhere, anytime. So flexible working options, reduced travel time. We did a survey one time. What do you like the least about your job? And the most typical answer is getting there, meaning the commute. It's thereby also better for the environment, and it definitely increases the productivity, not to be stuck between point A and B, being allowed and able to work whenever and wherever. It has been an experiment that also has revealed some negative sides. Our research, and this is global, by the way, 6 of 10 people have struggled with internet connectivity. In the Philippines, by definition, we have very poor internet connectivity. And if we're working from home and even competing with spouse and children for internet speed or capacity, that is hurting our productivity. 30% of workers said that their family members, partners, or housemates are the number one distractor. And reality is, when we do these surveys, if you had the ability to work from home, would you like to do so? People tend to answer yes. But if you really ask into it, what they mean is they would like the ability to work near home, because at home, either you get distracted, disturbed by family and others, barking dogs, roosters, the Tahoe salesman who occasionally passes by. In the background, we all know the pictures, the backdrops. Either you get disturbed, or the alternative is, if you don't get disturbed, people are more likely then to feel lonesome, and therefore 50%, they or 23% of the remote employees, they say they literally miss their colleagues. And by the way, 50% of the firms, they do not appreciate that people, because of data confidentiality, data protection, that they work from home without a proper firewall. So if we look at the map here on my screen, what we see happening now is, say that that there's a conventional head office in BGC, like where I'm seated now, with say 10 floors and a big capital investment there and no other offices. When their lease is up for renewal, they might only retain 2 or 3 floors and give the rest back to the landlord. So conventional leases business, that's one of the losers in this equation. The winners, on the other hand, that's out in the suburbs and the provinces, because what those major companies do instead is that they take satellite or office hubs with providers like us. So let's say they take one big office where the employees can go in and close the door and be private and talk about confidential business issues. They might take one hub in Eastwood in Quezon City, another one in Times Plaza in good old Manila, and the third one might be down in Alabama. And to top that up, they might buy hundreds, if not thousands, of memberships so that those employees that get the membership, they can either work from that, go to that office where they can, the office hub, where they can close the door behind them, or they can just drop into the nearest location of ours and work from the lounge. IWG, we have been in business for just over 30 years, and we have today, globally, 3 million members. We have 3,500 locations in just over 120 countries. And as mentioned, 3 million members, people who rely on our solutions to go for their professional workspace. We have added, out of those 3 million, 500,000 was added just in first quarter. So talking about reinventing yourself or re-engineering your business, we are at the forefront of those companies that are reinventing at least the way they go to work. They are preparing for what comes on the other side. Most companies, I've seen from 76% in some research to over 80% in others. Such a big share of the companies do not expect their employees to return to work the same way as they used to when we come out on the other side. So Standard Chartered Bank, for example, this is about 2 months ago, they bought 95,000 memberships. So they have 95,000 named employees who have a membership and can drop into any of our locations nationwide. And that's interesting because obviously it's a bank, and a bank cannot allow people to work with bank data from a home without a firewall. They need not only proper and effective internet connectivity, but they need a proper and safe firewall that you need a professional office space provider like IWG to ensure for them. And another example that followed also in first quarter this year was NTT. You may know them as a telecom company in Japan, but there's so much more than that. It's one of the biggest institutional investors in the world. In Japan, I believe their biggest competitor is actually SoftBank. They bought 300,000 memberships with us just a few weeks ago in the month of March. So that is very strong examples of the due diligence, the rethinking of your businesses, the way that businesses are preparing for how they will be coming out on the other side. So let's back up to a historical scenario. Let's look at the Roaring 20s. There are some extreme similarities. Well, one is just extreme and not a similarity, thank God. They actually just came out of World War I that lasted for 4 horrible years. It ended in year 1918, and it is estimated that it killed 40 million, including civilians, but it was more than half was on the battlefield. And just at the end of the war, we were also hit by the influenza or the Spanish flu, which is estimated to have killed another 50 million of a total population back then, obviously much smaller than today. So talking about arriving into a new time, and here there are different theories, by the way. When we can go out and move around freely again, will we see comfort in doing exactly the same and buy the same things and eat the same food as we did before? Or will we go out and sort of have a very short memory and start a new era. I'm a firm believer in the latter, but there are theories against it. But my belief is definitely confirmed, at least in the historical picture of the Roaring Twenties, because everything changed. Even, I mean, socially, there were attire, fashion, the women in their much shorter and tighter dresses, even short hair like boys, and the style of dancing. The Roaring Twenties was called Roaring for a reason. I mean, I read articles about how they partied and the painters came off freely almost, and the jazz music that was in back then. And at the same time, businesses were thriving, buildings were shooting up, and the smoke was again coming out the chimneys of the factories, not building war killing machines, but actually good stuff for a more affluent living, for the better of society. So there's a saying, there's a book actually that where the title is "What got you here won't get you there." And as Charles Darwin said much earlier, it is not the strongest species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the most responsive to change. So I can only say it's the dead fish that floats with the current, and only the live ones that do the opposite. I hope I've given a few ideas and some inspiration, and I hope even more so that there will be some more cases that some of you will share with us, maybe some questions. But for now, thank you, and I will back to you, Jesper.
Thank you so much, Lars. This was very inspiring, and I think it's great examples of how not to waste a crisis, right? Like the title, especially what you at IWG has managed to, I mean, increase your business that much. That's fantastic. And I think moving forward, the requirement, I mean, as you mentioned yourself, somehow requirement for share spaces and more flexible work conditions, not necessarily going back to a corporate office as such. I think that's only going to increase furthermore. So I guess it's a pretty good business moving forward to be in. Um, we, I mean, examples from other people. We are very happy to get it. Um, I hope somebody will share. And also, if you have any kind of questions related to all of this presentation from Lars, as you mentioned, please feel free. And usually we ask for questions in the chat, but we would be very happy if somebody is keen to unmute themselves and maybe share a similar story like Lars shared about, maybe not the SAS story, right, from your company, but maybe the more positive one, and how you managed to keep your customers happy during this time. If anybody is keen to share, please unmute yourself. You can turn on your video as well. We would be happy to hear somebody.
Hi, Jasper. This is Tina Vitas.
Hi, Tina.
Hi. I'm happy to be back in the NordCham webinars. I missed quite a few already. But in any case, I've spoken to a bunch of my entrepreneur friends, and it seems that a lot of companies, the small and medium size in particular, are having issues with cash flow. How do we manage cash flow during a time like this when there is so much uncertainty? And particularly in the food industry, the competition has become so tight because a lot of stay-at-home moms and dads are now also cooking and selling their food online. The delivery of Lala Move and Grab has made it possible for people at home to also take part in the online food delivery business. So the traditional restaurants and online food delivery businesses now have competition with at-home businesses. That's my question, basically. Thank you.
Well, I think it's a great question, and it is relevant to so many industries because of you're right. The amount of products and services that have been made available to us, or the number of providers that have sort of exploded on the internet is incredible. And not least here in the Philippines, which is a very young and very entrepreneurial and innovative population, always has been and always will be for sure. I love that part. Well, if you're stuck with a big restaurant where you can't have guests inside, you need to be careful that you don't get stuck there between a tough landlord and all of that competition or lack of demand. Something has to give, and if you have to absorb everything yourself, you won't make it. You'll break. So that's a dialogue you should also have with the landlord of the restaurant. Clearly, the food to go to be ordered can be made from a home kitchen. So that is basically the alternative for you to sustain your business. Just make sure that you maintain your brand, but your location and whether you are visible from the street level. I mean, we all know a restaurant on third floor doesn't get as many guests as one on the ground floor. That doesn't matter these days because there are very few people roaming around out there. So you just have to fend for yourself as much as possible and get the fixed cost absolutely down. And don't wait till you have spent your last penny on a restaurant that is empty. Then it's better to tell the landlord up front, and then it's up to the landlord whether they want to take the risk of losing you permanently or what. I mean, there's no doubt. Let's say that you have a gym, and we're not allowed to go to the gym, right? So how many are going to renew their membership? Well, if the gym is smart, then they say you can renew it for only a fraction of the price because we know you're not coming here. But that way you don't have to empty out your locker. And then we will go back to our regular fee when we are allowed to use the gym again. It's a very, very clever way to retain your customers by that gym. So it's a little bit comparable, right? So they stay vibrant, and the customers will almost for sure return to them when they're able to again. If they force them out completely, empty out their locker, and suddenly they are able to go back to the gym, I think that they're going to they will almost for sure just go on the internet and see what else is out there, what is perhaps a better location, a better price, perhaps both. So think in those thoughts, and don't let yourself be intimidated so much that you don't ask others to share this with you. And look at how many industries have increased their prices, their rates. Inflation is crazy at the moment, despite the fact that demand is less. Freight rates alone have more than tripled.
Yeah, maybe I can add or further build on the question, and Tina, just go ahead and follow up as well. But Lars, how do you see it? I mean, a restaurant might not necessarily have a customer database. How important is it to build a customer database during this time and moving forward, right?
Yeah, some restaurants, they certainly do have a database because they have discount cards. And I remember during the financial crisis, 2008, 2009, there was one restaurant chain in Denmark that did surprisingly well, and it was almost the only one. It was called Bones. It's the only one that had a family membership. So there was an enormous loyalty, because membership is the same as a loyalty card. So it's very important to have your customer list and to have that membership card, that loyalty that you then can appreciate. I mean, when we look at our business, we tend to focus a lot on, say, the 20% of the customers that are making a lot of noise and are complaining. And reality is they will probably complain regardless. And as soon as they get something at the same at a better price somewhere else, the loyalty is gone. And then the other 80% or so, or let's say that there is 20% in the other end of the scale, regardless of your price, regardless of somebody else being cheaper, they will never leave you because they love you. You are their one and only for the rest of their lives. They will go into the sunset with you, hand in hand, happily so. That leaves 60% in the middle. The 60% are very easy to move by competition or by situations, due to situations like this, because they're your customers by habit. Many of them have forgotten why they went to you, why they thought you were the best to go to in the first place. And you have forgotten to remind them because they don't complain like the others, but they are sitting very loose on their seats in your, say, restaurant. So they can be moved easily. So make sure, especially those that order, I mean, whatever is ordered to go, that makes you build up a database if you do not already have it in your mailing list. And if you do have it in your mailing list, think about getting out some meals, etc. I mean, definitely something that you could consider. And if you are a five-star restaurant with a Michelin star too, if you one day put up a soup kitchen in Tondo, that will give you a lot of publicity there. I remember when I worked in Vietnam and there were a horrible typhoon that went through the Da Nang area. I was sitting down in Saigon with Coca-Cola company. We used our trucks. Our trucks couldn't bring out Coca-Cola anyway. So, but we used them for free to bring up aid to all these people who were hit. So there's opportunities in everything.
Okay, yeah. And if you don't have, I mean, you don't have the database, and you're a restaurant like Tina is saying, right? And there's a lot of competition from small setups, right, that serve to their family and friends and a little bit beyond it. I assume Facebook, being on Shopee, being on Lazada, and other big
Yeah, those are the places that you
social.
have to advertise. But typically, I mean, many restaurants do really. I mean, even my hardware store, Ace, I have a membership card. So if they feel that I don't show up too much, you know, they can bombard me if they want to. Uh, and the same with a lot of restaurants. Italianis and a whole group of brands are in the same membership where you then get 10% discount and so on. But of course, I mean, if we really go far back, I believe it was during the Asian crisis that Jollibee was launched here, and very, very successfully so. And the reason is that if people don't go out for dinner any longer, well, maybe they do actually, but they just downgrade, they downtrade it. It's like instead of buying Johnny Walker Black Label, that is the more expensive one, you might buy the Red Label instead. Right? It's not that you don't drink Scotch at all. So people, there are trade-offs. What happened with Jollibee, because it was something brand new and there was a certain novelty about it, then you could still go out and say to your friends, oh, I took the wife and the children to that new place, Jollibee, the other day. Back in 1997, I also lived in the Philippines and the crisis hit very badly here. I mean, it was very bad. But people who no longer could afford La Soufflé, that also existed back then, they would instead go to Jollibee, and that was great for Jollibee. So they thrived on the crisis. And
I think a very recent story going back to, we are both from Denmark, right? I think Noma, #1 restaurant in the world, awarded many times. They also reinvented themselves and did burgers, right? Last summer. I mean, the craze was all over Copenhagen. people standing in line for hours to get a burger from. And I mean, so it's also about looking at opportunities and where can you go during these times.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I think Tina, if you have any follow up on it, feel free to.
Thank you, Jasper. Thank you, Lars.
Okay, hope you can use this perspective. It's more like a comment in the chat from Andy. He's saying the ability to be agile rings over and over again will be challenging for many firms to change their ways and consider alternative ways of running their businesses, especially working remotely. So I think we need to somehow debunk it, or that myth that maybe the Philippines is harder to do home working or remote working. What's your take on that compared to other countries?
Well, I think the desire, first of all, is even bigger here than other countries, simply because the population is so much younger. I mean, the average age here is 10 years younger than most other Southeast Asian nations. And the younger people are the millennials, Generation Z, and so on. They like the interaction and so on, but they don't want to do it based on 8 to 6 at a timesheet basis. Everybody, I mean, this country has always been ahead with the smartphones, for sure. And we have more than one phone, by the way, per capita. And it is to much higher degree smartphones, and it was smartphones much sooner than what we saw, for example, back in Scandinavia. So I disagree about the ability. People really have the ability to do it, and the younger generations are often very underestimated. And actually, the millennials have been very, very successful pre-COVID. So I think they can be trusted. I don't think that anybody should hold back.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thanks for sharing that. And I think you're right. And I hear from some of our members that are really considering, making it permanent for remote working and not necessarily needing an office. And I think it rings very well with Eric's comment. He's saying, in our company, we are fortunate that the lease agreement for one of the office floors expires in August. So from September, we'll reduce our office footprint by 24%. Even the remaining reduced office space may prove to be too much for our need, all depending on the future of work, whatever that model looks like. It's exciting times.
It's a very interesting observation, and I mean, it is one that almost everybody have been analyzing on right now, where before it could have taken 10 years before a company would have suddenly considered that kind of, how to downscale the traditional office space. But the reality is, our research shows that a typical workstation is vacant 55% of the time. 55% of the time. So it's obviously an enormous waste of time, of resources. Why not do it like Uber? I mean, Uber doesn't mean that there are fewer cars on the streets at any given time. It just means that every car is utilized much better, right? So if your office space is vacant 55, or a desk is vacant 55% of the time, you can basically save, say, 55% of all your office space. And then you will say, yes, Lars, but what about half of the time where there is more people? Well, then you just need the element of flexibility. And what was projected to be the case in the 2030 or slightly later than that, which was that 30% of all office space would be flexible one way or the other. That every single new building that is being turned over will have the element of flexible workspace. Otherwise, if they forgot that, they might as well forget the reception or the elevator or something other, absolutely parking, something really crucial. You need the element of flexible workspace, a provider like us, in every single office building. And trust me, there is no new office buildings being turned over without somebody like us in that building. That means that you, as the traditional employer can cut minimum 55% of your conventional office space, cut that. And whenever you need a little bit more space, you use that flexible workspace as your buffer. And of course, there are tons of big corporations right now that are kicking themselves for paying tremendous, huge amount of money for office space that has been standing pretty much empty the last year.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Um, there's a comment somehow from Andy again, which could somehow relate to it, and I'll just read it and then I'll add a little bit to it. So he's saying it's the older generation that is currently running some of the firms. I think what he's saying is maybe they're a little bit more traditional and like it in a specific way. And I think with the co-office, sharing office, etc., some are also thinking, how do I deal with confidential things? How do I, as the managing director or director level, how do I have that room for me and ensuring that? How are you guys dealing with that kind of situations?
Yeah, but that is a very typical scenario that it is more difficult for us, the more mature generations, to embrace the flexible working, the hybrid working. And how do we relate to those employees? I mean, the good old mindset is that we go to work and it's very important not to be late. And if you're 10 minutes late, it doesn't look good. If you're 10 minutes late the next day also, it looks terrible and so on, right? And then suddenly, and then people say, I want to be able to work whenever and wherever. Okay, so they don't want to, by choice, they don't want to come in here, so they don't want me to be available in, because my door is always open. All bosses says that, right? My door is always open. And now they don't want to have access to me suddenly. They're very sort of like, this is almost, I'm offended. But then it's also confusing for them because what about when one of these younger employees, they do a good job? Should I compliment them or they don't care? Maybe they even think I'm an old idiot if I compliment them. I mean, so there's a lot of getting used to here. There's a lot of learning between the generations. But one thing I can just guarantee is if you don't keep up with flexible working, you, Mr. CEO, you will be obsolete very, very soon. Because when you see statistically that either a typical big company or an entire industry can be obsolete in barely 10 years because they don't keep up or they're simply not needed any longer, can you then imagine us as people not keeping up? So we have to keep up with flexible working. We have to keep up with the younger people. And by the way, with the speed of change and innovation and everything else, we don't have the luxury or the time to go back to the school bench and be updated all the time. The best way we can be updated, that is by interacting with Generation Z and the millennials. So in order for me not to become obsolete overnight, I have to be interacting with all of those. And coincidentally, I know that they love to interact with us much more mature guys because they are successful, but they also know they are probably more successful than their experience and maybe even skills justifies. We know from research that if they could have a mentor, they would like to have a mentor. They seek mentorship. So there's a lot of opportunities to actually interact, and you have to mentally picture yourself in your suit, maybe even a necktie, standing with your cup of coffee, having a relaxed conversation with almost a teenager in a white t-shirt and jeans with holes on in the office or in the co-working area of your office, because that will become ground zero for the exchange of knowledge and accessing knowledge between each other. So we are very dependent of the much younger employees, but we have to allow them to work the way where they are most productive and which the way that they like. Because if you don't, not only will you lose that productivity, you will lose the employees because you can't attract them, and if you attract them, you can't retain them.
Yeah, I think, I mean,
Can I make a comment?
you're very passionate about this, and I think, I mean, we agreed we will do a quarterly event. Maybe that could be a topic for next time, or the next time again. So
Yeah.
every quarter we're going to do an event with Lars and IWG. So Lars, I think we should consider utilizing all that knowledge from the younger people, and how to do that as an event. But we can discuss that further at a later point of time.
Can
I
I
think
make
I interrupted somebody. There's a comment.
can I make a comment about that, Lars?
Yeah.
I'm 52 years old, and majority of my companies are 30, ages 20 to 30 years old. Our deputy manager, Roan Lopez, who's in this call, is 35 years old. I think the combination of the older CEO like me, who's 52, is wisdom, judgment, and experience.
Yeah.
And the younger people is speed, imagination, and digital savvy.
Yeah.
To marry both those generations together is a marriage made in heaven.
Absolutely, you totally nailed it. And the young people are seeking it. Actually, us baby boomers, we can be really proud during this crisis, although we have not tried a crisis just like this one before. Somehow we have seen this film before, right? We tried the Asian crisis, you too then. We tried the financial crisis. These millennials, they never tried it before, so they don't know to what degree they really should panic or not worry so much. But they just know that this is untested territory. And now suddenly my children, they no longer say boomer Lars, and in an attempt to make fun of me. They suddenly realize that that kind of experience that a boomer, a proud boomer like me, has can be very valuable, especially in this current environment.
Yes, and I think with my discussions with Roan Lopez, who's my deputy manager, you cannot waste a good crisis, because during these times when the sales and the way the businesses are running are not full capacity, this is the perfect opportunity to
Mhm.
fix what needs fixing.
Exactly.
If you waste this opportunity in 2020, you're not going to be ready for action,
Exactly.
right? So now is the time.
Yep, I agree.
Thank you so much for sharing, Tina, and I think we all agree and appreciate it. Are there anybody else? I saw some that unmuted, but then they muted themselves again. Anybody else who wants to share, or some question? Oh, now it's very quiet. Um, so Lars, I think that there's comments saying great point, love the insights. But maybe we dwell a little bit more on this, how to turn the crisis into an opportunity, and don't waste it. I mean, what you mainly talked about was branding, and maintaining your brand, and use that in a positive way, and reinvent it somehow.
Yeah, the brain, but also yourself. I
Mm.
think we also actually can talk a little bit more than on the HR issue and the generation gap. Actually, also the gender gap. Let's start with the latter first. Um, uh, According to the World Forum, Philippines is now number 17 in the world in terms of closing the gender gap. So over the last 3-4 years, have dropped down from number 8, I think, when it was the best. Um, but that still places Philippines number 1 in Asia in terms of closing the gender gap. And by the way, as a footnote, Denmark, where Jesper and I are from, is number 29. So obviously, without the risk of breaking any news, because no spoiler alert, we all know this. Filipino women, they rock. And that gender gap, we just need to close it even more. And this type of flexible working whenever, wherever, hybrid working, that actually makes it a lot easier for women or for people to enter the workforce on a part-time basis, or to re-enter the workforce because maybe you've been out for a while. Could be a mother, now the children are so much older, so without having to make the big commute back to the office, then that is a way to get back in. And when we close the gender gap, then we increase the human capital. When we increase the human capital, we increase the inclusive growth, alleviating poverty, etc. Something we will need a lot more of when we come out on the other side, not poverty, but alleviating poverty. So those elements are very important. One thing that actually have brought us a lot closer is, and I spoke a little bit about it earlier, that CEO in the corner office, very few people would ever have actually been in there, sitting in a chair across from him. Thanks to us being separated at home, looking into the screen like we do now with the camera on. And that's the big advice, best advice I can give to CEOs, is to turn on the camera. The fact that we can sit here and look into each other's homes, and child passes by, all of those things, it does bring us closer. It's a fantastic opportunity, and it has actually, without us perhaps even realizing it, it has made the organizations flat, more flat, because suddenly we are interacting with people that we normally would not necessarily have invited into that meeting. And hence my personal theory that this will cost quite a few middle managers their jobs, because they're perhaps not as needed any longer as we thought that they were.
Yeah, that's an interesting point of view, and I think you're right. I mean, middle management is not obsolete, but they have to bring something extra to the table moving forward. It's probably, or most likely at least, somewhat less micromanagement as well involved.
Yeah, absolutely, because we had some mistaken perception that we had to micromanage much more than it was the case. And besides, people were really motivated this time because we were all in the same situation, we were on the same mission, and it was serious, right? So being separated so much, yet being on the same calls with video, in the same scenario, that has really made some very close relations in the various organizations.
Maybe somebody among our participants would like to share their experience with this. Feel free to unmute yourself and share. You know, how has that, you know, turned out in your company?
Whether you feel closer to your teams by being divided, by being prohibited from being under the same roof. Has that brought you closer or not?
So while I mean, if somebody wants to share, please do so. I can say from my side, from Nordjam's side, right? Obviously, we usually have social events, right, and meeting a lot of people. That's hard. It can't be done now. But also going to the office. I mean, and meeting office staff, even if you are a small setup. I know we enjoyed a lot using your facilities before. Now with the crisis, we don't meet as many other people, but it still works out well, and the flexibility is fantastic. But how, just building on that and that experience with the co-working, you would also get new inputs and meet new people, right? How important do you see that for businesses moving forward? You understand my question? Or maybe I have a connectivity issue.
But I think that that Nordjam is a very good example, actually, because where we before would have a meeting like this in some kind of a venue, do sit, whatever, then now that we cannot do it, we actually have the opportunity of bringing in many more people, because it is not defined by geography. I mean, just we know that this type of events, if it was in BGC, there would be fewer people attending compared to Makati because it's easier to access Makati in a car. Now it doesn't matter because it's Zoom. It doesn't even matter if it is a company or a person sitting in, say, Iloilo. So suddenly we can be much more inclusive, and people geographically can be anywhere in the country or even outside the country. Last time I spoke at an event like this, well, yeah, one of the times I did not so long ago was to the Dutch chamber, and that was all the Dutch chambers in Southeast Asia. So
Yeah.
suddenly, I mean, we can do much bigger audiences also.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, we have this upcoming event with Wallenberg, for instance. That's an APAC event,
Yeah.
right? So we reach all suites basically in all of APAC. And obviously we're also doing a number of events with the European chambers especially, right? So we gather. We did some of that before as well, but not to the same extent, right? And people from the Nordics can join us, which is also great. So yeah, these opportunities are big. And I would say, last but not least, I mean, if we look at 2019, right, we did less than 30 events. In 2020, we did 161.
Yeah.
So not only can we reach more people at the same event or easier, but members and friends of example Nordjam, right? They get so many more events and so many more insights and inspiration than before.
It's also easier for you to get better, different speakers because they don't have to travel. When I lived in Japan, I mean, almost every year there was a visit by somebody like the American president and so on. But I mean, how often do the heads of states visit? How often are the CEOs of the really big global companies visiting the Philippines? I mean, it's pretty close to never, right? But now suddenly we actually have the opportunity to invite them to speak because they just have to go online. So we just have to consider the time difference. And if it makes it more attractive for them, we can even include a few more countries.
How important do you think? I mean, obviously this is our part of our business, right? That's why we are here from Nordjam's side also to deliver some events. But companies that are not involved in events before, do you see that as something that they really should consider with the changes and things?
Well, this is a relations economy. Back in Copenhagen, I was really good friends with the Chinese ambassador Xi. And he one time said to me, Mr. Wittig, you're doing the right thing because know-how is very good, know-who is much better. So you should never stop networking. It's absolutely stupid. And if you cannot go out and get inspiration from others, it's bad. It's the beginning of the end. And as I mentioned earlier, we don't have time any longer to go back to the school bench to get up to date on anything. So we have to learn on the go, just like we are working on the go.
Yeah. So I was just thinking, and I was trying to also think, how could we help Tina from our side, right? And I know, I mean, we did some gin tasting before and different things. I mean, those kind of opportunities, it's about grabbing it, right? I know a chamber in the Swedish chamber, for instance, in Hong Kong, they are now doing cooking classes.
Yeah.
Right? So they engage with some restaurants and say, hey, why don't you brand yourself via us and help some of our members, to learn a simple dish?
Yep.
Stuff like
My
that is what we
wife
all
is
want.
taking French lessons from the French Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah.
In case
So
anybody wants to learn Danish.
Yeah, we are actually, or I am already testing out some Danish tutors and we're gonna do hopefully gonna do the same with Swedish and Norwegian. I'm not sure if the Finnish one is even possible. At least if you come from Denmark, you understand Swedish and Norwegian quite well, but not at all Finnish, right? But those kind of things, and I think that there's also opportunities in that for companies. And Tina, if you want to do a cooking class, please reach out to us.
Actually, a good idea. Yeah.
I have another comment because I was during the beginning of the pandemic. At certain points, I've had to really work from home 100% for several reasons. And most recent episode was 22 days. When you don't physically see your employees over long periods of time, more important how you communicate virtually, by text, by WhatsApp, by Viber, by email. Because as a leader, when you are not being seen in person, your energy, that everything is under control and you are taking care of them, are even more important. So
Yep.
the messaging, the power of the messaging, the tone, the energy, the positivity, the optimism, the pragmatism, all these things help the people who work with you because it makes them less fearful.
Yeah,
And
and it also makes them proud. I mean, if you in any way, form or shape can be on in the media somehow and so on, then that's a very effective way to communicate internally is actually to do it externally. I hope that there are a few of my people here on this call also and so on. And I mean, it's a very good way to communicate internally is to do it to the broader world. And people tend to listen more and then adapt to it more because it's sort of like part of their identity that is being projected.
Good. Thanks. Some good sharings. I think we are getting close to the end of the event. We can allow for one more person to share some questions or some perspectives if you want. But this is the last call for it. Last, so I think we covered a lot of ground here, a lot of great inspiration and insights. I think everybody got new ideas hopefully and things that they can do. And I think both of us and our organizations, we are basically there to help people, right? So if people have questions after this event, feel free to reach out. You can at least reach out to me and I can direct it to Lars and get something. I think that's what we like to do as well, right, Lars?
Yep, connecting people.
Exactly. So I don't see anybody raising their hands or unmuting themselves, and so I think we are coming to an end for this event. Um, Before we finish, I would love if people can turn on their cameras and we can take a group picture. And while people they do that, I wanna extend a huge thank you, Lars, to you for sharing all your insights and giving us this inspiration. Really appreciate it. And I'm already looking forward to our next event, which is in next quarter. So it's gonna be interesting with the new kind of insights. I see a lot of people having turned on their cameras already. So I think we are getting ready for a picture. Sorry, we didn't warn you in advance. Maybe just like me, I mean, I need to go and get a haircut, but don't worry. I mean, it should be okay to take a picture anyway. We all understand why it has not been possible for a few weeks now, right? Anyway, let's do the picture taking. Thank you again. I'll just take a picture with my phone, otherwise it's too hard. So,
I'm ready.
Anne, can you
I
help
can do it.
also?
Mhm.
Great. All right,
Okay,
let's do
1,
this, everybody.
2,
Anne, count.
3. Okay, another one. 1, 2, 3. With a thumbs up, please.
Yay.
1, 2, 3. Okay, got it.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us, for spending time